really wanna know, then come on, let's go. Take a stroll down those.
What's going on, everybody? Welcome back into the Country Roads Webcast, brought to you by Trio 4 Productions. And it's that time. It's prediction time. We're going to give our season predictions for WVU football's 2018 season today and how we think they'll end up. And I've got a special guest joining me here in a few minutes, a good friend of the Country Roads Webcast and Mountaineer football fanatic, Stephen Vestal. He'll join me and make these picks for West Virginia's season. So I'm going to take a minute and get him on the phone line there. And we're going to be back and bring you our season prediction special and tell you what we think is going to happen this year for WVU's football season. Stay tuned to the Country Roads Webcast. All right, we're back on the Country Roads Webcast to bring you our season prediction show. I'm joined by Stephen Vestal, Mountaineer season ticket holder and friend of the Country Roads Webcast. How you doing, Stephen? Good to have you on, man.
Thank you, man. Thank you for having me.
No doubt, no doubt. So are you ready to get into this thing?
Let's do it.
All right, let's do it. Starting off at the top, September 1st, West Virginia takes on the Tennessee Volunteers in Charlotte, neutral site game. What do you see happening there, Stephen?
I think it's a close game, that game, but I think we pull out the win in that game, just for the sheer fact of how inexperienced Tennessee is.
I'm going to agree with you there. I got West Virginia at 1-0 after that game. Tennessee, they returned 12 starters. They went 4-8 last year, 0-8 in the SEC. Bringing in a new coach in Jeremy Pruitt, they're switching offenses from the spread to the pro-style attack, and I think it's going to take them a few games to get going, and I think that they really aren't going to be able to keep up with West Virginia's scoring. And, they're going to try and play ball control, and I think that it may end up hurting them more than helping them. So I got West Virginia 1-0 there also.
Yep.
Then next, September 8th, taking on Youngstown State. Not too much to say about this one. I got a W for sure. I'm putting them at 2-0. What about you, Stephen?
Yeah, 2-0 for sure on that game. Youngstown State don't have enough firepower to keep up with our offense.
I agree 100%. And then third game of the season, September 15th, West Virginia travels on the road to Raleigh. Tough place to play. Take on the NC State Wolfpack. They returned 9 starters. They went 9-4 last year, 6-2 in the ACC. Returning 9 starters, they lose a lot, especially over there on the defensive side. It's going to be a good quarterback battle, I think, between Will Greer and Ryan Finley. What do you see happening down there in Raleigh, Stephen?
Yeah, I'm kind of having trouble with this game, just being on the road, but I want to say that we win this game and keep the ball rolling just because of Will Greer.
I agree. I think it's going to be a tough game on the road, tough road matchup, but I think that the difference is NC State only returning the 9 starters as well as losing a lot on defense. Bradley Chubb was a big player for him, and I think it's going to be a good quarterback battle. Ryan Finley and Will Greer, one of the better ones of the season.
I think it'll be within a field goal, I believe.
Yeah, I think West Virginia pulls out the W there, so I got them 3-0, and you do too, right?
Yep, 3-0 on that.
3-0 for both of us right now. Then West Virginia comes back home September 22nd to take on Kansas State. It's the Strike the Stadium game. Kansas State, they returned 13 starters, went 8-5 last year, 5-4 in the Big 12. What do you think is going to happen, Dana Holgerson versus Bill Snyder in this game?
4-0 on that one, man. That's another close game, but I think West Virginia pulls it out.
I think so too. I think since West Virginia finally defeated Kansas State a couple years ago, they beat them again last year. I think they finally may have their number, especially with this being the Big 12 opener and at home in Morgantown. I think it's going to be another W, and I've got them 4-0 as well and 1-0 in the Big 12.
Yep.
Then next, right on. Then the next one, brother, we got traveling on the road to Lubbock. Tough place to play. This game kind of scares me a little bit. Me and you talked about this a little bit already before, and a little bit. It's kind of a scary game here going on the road to take on Texas Tech. What do you think the outcome's going to be down there in Lubbock?
Yeah, as much as I hate to say it, I think this one's a kind of a trap game for me. I think it's a revenge game for Texas Tech. I think we go down to Lubbock and lose this one.
Giving us a loss down there in Lubbock, so we got us at 4-1, 1-1 in the Big 12. I struggled with this one as well. I really almost did the same and gave them a loss just because I think that it's the type of game that, it's early enough in the schedule that's one that you wouldn't really mind to lose, because Texas Tech's a team that's not going to factor in at the end as far as going to the Big 12 championship game. They're not going to be one of the top 2 or 3 teams in the conference, So if you want to lose to somebody, why not lose to them, and why not lose early, But
Right.
I think that I think they got a lot of questions on offense. That offense is probably going to produce. It always does, but they're not really settled on a quarterback or anything like that yet. And I almost gave us a loss, but I've got us getting that win and going to 5-0 and 2-0 in the Big 12.
Okay.
Then October 6th, moving on, West Virginia comes home. Homecoming game, taking on the Kansas Jayhawks. It's the Gold Rush game. What do you think is going to happen there?
I think West Virginia gets back on track, and I think they blow Kansas out of the water. I got them winning big in that game.
Big win there. So Stephen has them at 5-1 now, 2-1 in the Big 12. I'm also going to agree with Stephen and say Kansas doesn't stand a chance. Even though Kansas does return 19 starters, I think that's tied for the most in the country, actually. But, they went 1-11 last year, 0-9 in the Big 12. Their one win, I believe, was over an FCS team. So I think they're going to struggle again this year, have, a similar type of record to that, despite returning all the starters. And West Virginia gets an easy win there. And I've got them at 6-0, 3-0 in the conference.
There you go.
Moving on to the next week, another tough road game, and this one really worries me a lot. Going on the road to a much improved Iowa State team, and it's always hard to win in Ames anyway. They have a tough place to play down there, and Matt Campbell came in and last year really revitalized that program. They got 12 returning starters coming off an 8-5 year where they went 5-4 in the Big 12. What do you think is going to happen down there in Ames, Stephen?
I think this is going to be a tough game for us, and I've seen a lot of people pick us to lose in this. I think we go down there and win. But again, I think it's going to be another close game. It's going to be another shootout for us.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think we're going to get the win, but I think it's going to be a really tough win. I almost gave us this loss here, but I've got a lot of faith in this team, and I think Iowa State. I think they're going to have another good year, but I think they're not going to sneak up on anybody this year. Everybody's kind of looking for them to be better like they were last year, and so that's going to help. And I got West Virginia 7-0, 4-0 in the Big 12, and I believe you have them 6-1 and 3-1 in the Big 12, right?
Yep.
All right.
Same.
Bye week the next week after that. Then following the bye week, they have a short week to prepare for Baylor back at home on a Thursday night contest. Baylor's a team, they went 1-11 last year, 1-8 in the conference, but they do return 17 starters, and a lot of those games that they lost last year were very close contests, and they could have won. They hung right in there with Oklahoma. I think they only ended up losing by a few. They only lost by 2 to us last season, so not going to be a walkover, and I think they're going to be much improved this year, and they're going to really improve that 1-11 record. I expect them to maybe even get to a bowl game this season. That being said, what do you think is going to happen on that Thursday night in Morgantown as West Virginia takes on Baylor?
I think we beat them. I think it's once again another shootout. I don't think that any game that we win this year is not going to be a shootout this year, just because of the sheer fact of how inexperienced our defense is. So, again, I think we win in another shootout in Morgantown that night.
I can see that for sure. Another shootout is a definite possibility. Baylor's got arguably the second best quarterback in the conference, returning with Charlie Brewer, the freshman that came in last year and played really well. But I agree with you. I think we're going to get the W there. And that puts me at 8-0 for West Virginia and 5-0 in the Big 12. And, that's a big run to win your first 8 games. But then you step into this Deathvember, as I like to call it, November, arguably the 4 toughest teams in the conference all in a row here in November. I've got West Virginia 8-0, 5-0. You've got them 7-1, 4-1 in the conference. Heading into a very tough road game down in Austin, taking on the Texas Longhorns, who a lot of people are thinking may compete for a conference title and finally be back this year. We hear Texas is back every year, but I think this year they may really be. I like Tom Herman a lot, and I think that they got a lot of good players down there, a lot of good talent. And what do you think is going to happen down there in Austin, taking on Texas on November 3rd?
I know a lot of people are saying that Texas are back. I'm not quite buying into that until I see them play at least a half a season. I think without Will Greer getting hurt last year, we win that game. I still think we go down to Texas and we beat them, but I think it'll be a close game.
I like that. So you got them 8-1 and 5-1 in the Big 12 now. I agree with you. I think I'll go to my grave saying that if Will Greer doesn't get hurt in that game, we beat Texas last year. I truly believe that. I'm right there with you. And
Yep.
I think going into Texas, it's a tough place to play. West Virginia's won there before, but I think that Tom Herman's really going to improve this Texas team. They got a quarterback battle there with Ellinger and Buechele, but I think, of course, by this time it'll be settled, and they'll be settled into what they're doing and coming into their own. And I got West Virginia losing down there in a close one down in Austin, and I got them also now 8-1 and 5-1 in the conference. Then West Virginia comes back home, and it's the True Blue game, and they're going to take on TCU Horned Frogs on November 10th. What's your prediction in that one, Stephen?
I give this one another loss. TCU, I think, is going to be too good for us on offense to keep up with them. Going point for point. I think our defense is just too bad to keep up with this one.
I could see that happen. I think it's definitely going to be a battle, and looking at West Virginia and TCU games in the past, most of them have been very close, and they've been, neck and neck competing in this conference. I think that the home field advantage is going to help West Virginia a lot in this one. Like you said, TCU's offense, they replace a lot, but by this time in the season, they'll have come into their own, and Gary Patterson is known for always having a good defense at TCU, so I don't think you have to worry about that. But I think West Virginia does just enough and has enough of a home field advantage to get the win here, and I've got them 9-1, 6-1 in the conference. And what do you got, a 9-2, or 8-2, and 5-2 in the conference?
Yep, sir.
All right. So I've got them 9-1, 6-1 in the Big 12 at this point. 2 games left. Stephen has them 8-2, 5-2 in the conference. 2 games left. Then they go on the road again, take on Oklahoma State Cowboys on November 17th. Mike Gundy and those guys, they also are looking to replace a quarterback. Got a battle then. By this time in the season, of course, like I said, that's going to be settled, and they'll be coming into their own. And I think that offense is always going to be good with Mike Gundy and the system he's got going there. And what do you think is going to happen down there as they take on Oklahoma State?
I think we go on the road and we get back on track and we win that game. I think actually we win this game by more than a touchdown, just because I think it's going to be a statement game being so late in the season. I think Will Green will be ready to step up to the challenge out there.
I agree with you on that one. I think they go down there in Stillwater and they get a win. I think that Oklahoma State, Mike Gundy's going to have them ready, and they're going to be better than people project, but I think they may take a step back from what they did last year when they went 10-3 and 6-3 in the conference. I think I'm looking at something more like 8 or 9 wins for Oklahoma State this year, and I think West Virginia can go on the road there and get that win. So I've got them at 10-1 and 7-1 in the Big 12 at that point, and got 9-2 and 6-2 in the Big 12. So then the big game after that, coming on Black Friday, November 23rd, that pesky team that West Virginia has yet to beat since joining the Big 12. It's going to be Senior Day. Like I said, it's on Black Friday, and they're going to be taking on the Oklahoma Sooners at home. West Virginia 0-6 since joining the Big 12. I believe it's 0-7 actually. I think 0-7. So are they going to get to 1-7 with this one, Stephen, or are they going to be 0-8 versus Oklahoma after this game? What do you think's happening?
I've been having a lot of trouble with this one just because of the identity of Kyler Murray. I don't know what to expect out of him. I don't know if we're going to see the Kyler Murray that we see against West Virginia last year, or if we're going to see another Kyler Murray. I have us winning this game by 3 points, just because I think Will Greer is finally going to get us over that hump, and this one being at home and such a big home game in the late in the season, I think we'll finally get that done.
I hope so. I hope they finally get that monkey off their back and get that win against Oklahoma. And here's my problem with this game is that there's a good chance that West Virginia and Oklahoma are going to end up being the top 2 teams in the conference. And I hate the fact that a team that West Virginia is 0-7 against joining the Big 12, that they may have to beat 2 times in a row in order to win the Big 12 conference championship. And I don't understand, the Big 12 scheduling in that, why you would have teams that are projected to maybe be 1-2 play last game of the season. I think that they need to work on the scheduling end of that for sure. But I struggle with this game as well, and I don't know. I think there's a great chance that they finally win this game, but until I see it, I'm going to give them a loss in this game, and I'm going to have them finishing the season at 10-2 and 7-2 in the conference. And I believe that's also what you have is 10-2 and 7-2 in the conference, right?
Yep.
We just got the losses coming in different spots, but I do feel like with that record though, they will the next week be playing in the Big 12 championship game. What say you?
You said you don't feel like we'll win the Big 12 with that record?
I think that they'll be in the Big 12 championship game with that record. I think that they'll finish second behind Oklahoma and then lose to them that week, but then turn around right the next week and play them again in the Big 12 title game, actually.
Yeah, I think if they can just stick to those two and not keep it with any more, they have a strong chance of making it to the Big 12 championship game.
Yeah, and based on that, that's kind of why I decided to give them the loss in the last season game because, it's hard to beat a team twice in a row, but I feel like especially if West Virginia, does take a loss in that final game of the season, then they have a great chance to get the win and turn around and get the win in the Big 12 championship game the next week.
Yeah. I think if they do end up playing Oklahoma in that championship game, I think that unfortunately it's going to be too much for West Virginia to handle.
That's the way I kind of look at it too. Is it's you can't have your cake and eat it too. I don't, especially where they're 0-7 against Oklahoma. I don't see them beating them twice in a row, especially. So, best case scenario for West Virginia is lose the end of the season, then win Big 12 title, or somehow, some way, Oklahoma maybe takes a step back and someone else is up there in that conference championship game with them. Then that's about the best case scenario they can hope for, is not having to play Oklahoma in back-to-back weeks, because I don't see them beating Oklahoma twice in a row.
No, I think it largely in part is due on how healthy we stay and how good our defense actually is this year. If our defense is anything like Gibby says it's going to be, I think we may have a chance to do better. But if they're anything like they were last year, I hate to be one of those people, but I'm still comparing this team to the 2012 team of Gino and Tavon and them.
I think, you've been hearing that comparison a lot, and I think I can fully see it when you got an offense as loaded as this one and the defense with as many questions as this one has. I think the defense is going to be improved, but like you said, it all really depends on how healthy this team can stay because, across the board, the 11 starters on offense and the 11 starters on defense are up there, top 10, top 15 in the country probably, just with the top 22. But the fact of the matter is the depth behind them is probably not as strong as the starters. So it really just depends on if West Virginia can be lucky enough and get the lucky bounce to have their starters stay healthy for this season. And it depends on how good of a season it can be, really.
Yeah, and even on offense, we've seen how critical one person could be whenever Will Greer went down last year.
Oh, absolutely.
We potentially, before his injury, we potentially have, 2 less losses than what we did, and then after the injury, you definitely have 2 potential, less losses than what we did.
Exactly. So, like we said, I think me and you both said we think that they definitely would have won that Texas game, and I think they had a good chance finishing second or third in the conference. And if Will Greer doesn't go down, it would have been a whole different story to end the year last year for sure. That said, speaking of Will Greer, he's been getting a lot of Heisman hype throughout the offseason, and my question to you is, if West Virginia has the record that we both suspect, 10-2, or even if it's a little bit better than that, what's his chances of winning the Heisman? And I'm going to go ahead and say, if West Virginia's 10-2, that he's going to be in New York for the ceremony as one of the finalists. And I think it kind of depends on what everybody else does. But if he has good numbers and West Virginia's 10-2, playing in the Big 12 championship game, especially if they win it, like I think they may, I think he has a great chance of actually bringing home West Virginia's first ever Heisman.
I haven't had a guy from West Virginia be this high up on my list since Pat White, and I got to say he's got to be higher than him on that list just because of everything he can do. If he stays healthy and we win at least 10 ball games, I don't think there's any way you can keep him out of the Heisman race.
I agree with that wholeheartedly, and David Sills and him were both named AP All-Americans, and I think that's the first time since Pat White and Steve Slayton. I'm pretty sure that we have 2. And David Sills, last year was a Biletnikoff finalist, and he's being mentioned as a finalist for that award again. And I don't know, what do you think's more likely? Will Greer winning the Heisman or David Sills winning the Biletnikoff?
That's a good question. That's a great question. I thought David Sills had a very strong chance of winning the Biletnikoff last year. So I think he has a stronger chance to win the Biletnikoff than Greer does to win the Heisman. And that's not taking anything away from Greer. That's just I don't think there's anybody to compete with David Sills on that. With that award this year.
I think so.
With the hands that kid has.
I think so too. If if he doesn't get like you said, he probably should have had a good chance to win it last year, and for sure I don't think I've seen more of a robbery than Stedman Bailey not winning it in that 2012 season when he caught like 25 touchdowns, I believe it was. And if he doesn't win it then, I'm starting to just think there may be some kind of bias or some kind of conspiracy to keep West Virginia from winning that award or something. I don't know. If he doesn't win it then, it's hard to say. But I will say that if Will Greer does indeed win the Heisman, that I think you get the Blitnikoff along with that, and that would be just really awesome for West Virginia to have either one of those awards come home. They only have the one major award winner ever, and that was Dan Moses when he won the Remington Award back in 2006, I believe it was. And so that even if West Virginia has a good season, but if they bring home a Heisman, then that's something that's never been done and unprecedented and really huge accomplishment. We both have West Virginia sitting at 10-2 to end the season. If they do finish that 10-2 and then play in the Big 12 championship game, win that at 11-2, do you think there is any shot at all for them to get into that college football playoff with 2 losses?
Not a West Virginia team. I'd love to say yes. I want to say yes, but I still don't think that this West Virginia team can make it to the playoff. Not even, especially with 2 losses. I think it'd be difficult for a West Virginia team with 1 loss to make the playoff. I think that the only way that West Virginia's going to be able to make a playoff is we got to go undefeated. We got to have a powerhouse team that had all 3 sides of the ball just lights out, and that's the only way we're going to be able to do it.
I agree.
If we're in a hunt with a 10-2, Ohio State team or a 10-2 Alabama team, or even what have you, we're not going to make it over that.
Yeah, I agree, and I think that you can look at this year. I think that it may be kind of similar to 2014 when the Big 12 got left out due to having 2 good teams with TCU and Baylor, and I think that that's going to kind of happen maybe this year again for the Big 12. I don't think the Big 12 is going to be in the playoff this year, just for the simple fact that I think they're kind of going to beat each other up, and I think whoever ends up as that conference champion, like you said, may have 1 or 2 losses. And if it's a 1-loss Oklahoma team, they have a good chance of getting in. But I think outside of Oklahoma and Texas in this conference, you pretty much are going to have to go undefeated to get into that playoff. It's pretty biased as far as favoring the Blue Bloods and getting into that playoff. And I think West Virginia, like you said, is probably going to have to go undefeated to have a chance to get in there. 1 loss maybe, depending on what happens around the rest of the country. But even then, I highly doubt that a 1-loss West Virginia Big 12 team gets in over a 1-loss Pac-12 team or a 1-loss Big 10 team, I think.
Right.
It's sad to say because that was kind of, going away from the BCS, that was the big thing, was that was kind of supposed to eliminate the bias and stuff, but it's almost, you could say, just as bad, if not worse, with this playoff. Maybe if they expanded to 6 or 8 teams, it could eliminate it. But I think that it's hard to. It's hard to.
Now it feels like if you even do well in your conference, you still get a good bowl. But I don't know if it's whether the names of the bowls are different, or I just feel like the bowls are lesser. I don't know if that's just me or.
I'm right there with you. I agree. I think you still got your New Year's Six bowls, but even those, now that the playoffs there, if you don't get in the playoff, it still feels like I don't know, honorable mention to get into a New Year's Six bowl even. And that's another thing that I look at with it is, if it's gonna, I think it's gonna take a team going undefeated and getting into the playoffs and knocking out one of these Blue Bloods for them to finally consider, expanding to 6 or 8 teams, which I think would be really, really good. And it's going to take a Power 5 team that's not a traditional big name, like a West Virginia or, Baylor, or TC, somebody like that outside of Texas, Oklahoma, and then somebody outside of the big names in the other conference for them to, for them to think about expansion, because you've seen UCF undefeated last year, didn't do it. So it's going to take somebody with at least an above average, name to do it. But I think that expanding the playoffs needs to come at some point. I really do.
Yeah, I was kind of shocked to see that a team like Washington got into the playoffs a few years ago. Not that they weren't good, but you just don't see the committee let in teams like that.
Yeah, exactly.
Very often, you see the Ohio States, the Alabamas, the teams like that get in more so than everybody else. Right,
looking last year, the 2 SEC teams rather than bringing in Pac-12 teams. So I think if you expand it to 6 at least. I'd like to see 8, but if you go 6, then you should have the conference champion of each Power 5 conference, plus then you can have one at-large team in there if you go 6 teams, and I think that would be a lot better, because I feel like if you earn your conference championship in one of these Power 5 conferences, you should have a right to play for a national championship.
Yeah. If you win a Power 5 conference championship, you should definitely be there. I think you're right about that. No doubt.
I mean, for sure, especially when it's so unbalanced to me, because, looking at the Big 12, they play the round robin schedule, so they play 9 conference games. And, I think the Big 10 a couple of years ago went to 9 conference games, but then you look at the ACC and the SEC, considered some of the stronger conferences, and they only play 7 or 8 conference games, as well as they only play the teams in their division, really, and then the teams in the other division, they play like once every 6 years. So I think something needs to be done, either expand the playoff and have a criteria for it about conference championships getting in, or do something with scheduling to make scheduling where it's more uniform across college football and more fair for every conference and every team, really.
Yeah. I think my opinion on everything is, I think eventually we're going to get to a place where we don't even have conferences, but where we just have regions of, college football, and we're just going to, I think the best team from each region will make the playoff each year. Now, how true that is, I don't know, but I felt, and more in recent years, that's the way everything's kind of trending.
I like the sound of that. It'd be more fair and give everybody more of a chance, if it was out of each region. So I do like that. With that being said, I guess that will wrap us up here on our 2018 season prediction show. We both got West Virginia 10-2 and playing in the Big 12 championship. So fingers crossed that they get to the Big 12 championship and hopefully get those 10 wins and have a great season. And I think the possibility is there for sure. Thanks for being on with us today, Stephen, on the Country Roads Webcast. I appreciate it, and hopefully we can get you back on here again soon.
Yeah, man, thanks for having me. I'd love to be back on.
Oh, yeah, no
Go
problem.
Mountaineers.
We'll do it. Let's go Mountaineers. Take it easy, man.
You too, man. See you.
All right, there you have it. There is the 2018 WVU football season predictions from the Country Roads Webcast with our special guest, Stephen Vestal. Really appreciate him for being on the show with us. Stay tuned as we plan on bringing you more coverage as game week rolls around and the Mountaineers get ready to take on Tennessee in the first game of the season. Thanks for tuning in to the Country Roads Webcast, brought to you by Trio 4 Productions. I'm your host, Jordan Cruz. If you haven't already, give us a follow on Twitter at WVU Country Roads. And as always, let's go Mountaineers.